you get that right, then you can square that circle away between giving the customer something that they want and creating a compliant process that actually is a win-win for the customer.
Hello and welcome to the Banker's Masterclass on the value of transforming banking operations. My name is Brian Caplen, I'm editor of The Banker. I'm here with Martin Boyle, who's the Divisional Director of Business Transformation with UK's Nationwide, and Hugh Morris, who is Genpact's Vice President of Banking, Financial Services and Insurance. And we're going to start our discussions by talking about the challenges facing global retail banks. So Martin, you're with a major UK retail bank. What are the big challenges you face at the moment in this rather difficult environment for banking?
I mean, I think one of the things that we would all probably respond is that the level of regulation that we're facing now is perhaps been at the highest level that we've ever seen. For our organisation, we actually spend somewhere in the region of 30 to 35% of all of our strategic investment in responding to the regulatory demand. But that also has to be squared away with actually customers are changing behaviours. Therefore, they want things faster, quicker, with less intervention, and trying to square that regulation away with what customers want obviously has a cost impact. So I think another key challenge we would have is making sure that the costs that the business has to take are well understood and controlled as we try and square some of those circles away.
Okay. Hugh, I mean, you talk to lots of banks in the line of duty. Is that more or less what they're all telling you, or do they have different takes on it?
They're all saying that the costs of regulation are accelerating. The big banks with UK headquartered and beyond are all saying that they've got major remediation programs underway. A few years ago, those banks were saying to me, I'm spending 100 million a year plus on regulation. They're now saying to me, I'm spending $1 billion a year plus on regulation. And it is becoming a substantial overhead for the industry. It's also changing the nature of the regulatory investigation. The newly named Financial Conduct Authority is very specifically looking at conduct, behaviour, and that leaves very faint footprints in the information that's retained. So therefore, by its nature, there's somewhat of a retrospective view being taken by regulators as to whether behaviour was okay, depending on the outcome for the client, which is actually making, for our banking clients, understanding how to implement appropriate regulatory and compliance regimes a matter of some substantial complexity.
Okay. But Martin, I mean, is there a danger that you get a little bit too preoccupied with regulation? Because, I mean, obviously you have to comply with the regulations and you have to meet all the requirements, but it's not actually what the bank does in terms of serving its customers, is it?
I totally agree. One of the things that this is the new norm, effectively. We can sit and say we'd like it to be different. The reality is, customers want to feel that they trust their institution, that they feel safe and secure in it, and part of that is going to be increased regulatory intervention. That's just the reality. That's a fact of life. But what I would say is making sure that we can try and get value out of responding to regulation, but at the same time, how do we simplify things for our customers and enhance their experiences? If you can combine the two, that's a win-win for everybody. And I thought Hugh made a good point about the regulator. We're absolutely finding there was a lot of focus from the Prudential Regulatory Authority on capital and adequacy around that. It's now really the Financial Conduct Authority starting to bite in terms of making sure the conduct risk is well understood. And what we're trying to do is making sure that we respond to that in a way that we can guarantee that conduct is absolutely at the heart of what you do, because that's what customers expect, but at the same time create capabilities for people that are actually things that they want without actually overcomplicating stuff. And that is a tricky one to square away, basically.
Yeah. So Hugh, what would be your advice for banks that want to try and bring those two aspects together?
Well, I think that we're seeing quite a distinction between US banks and European banks, actually to the US banks' advantages, because they have taken very much a view that says in the new regulatory environment, we must redesign our processes in line with what the regulations are requiring. There is something of a trend in Europe for banks to impose a further round of checklists on top of the checklists that there already are, but ducking the issue of process redesign, and as a result of which they are ending up with more costly and cumbersome operations. Of course, that's a generalization, but we are seeing that in the market. So our advice would be you really have to go back and look at your process from a clean sheet of paper end to end. You need to simplify that process, eliminate where possible, allow customers to do everything that they could do for themselves because that's what they want, and then ensure that the processes you come up with are regulatorily conformant. And that is something that we see a number of banks being reluctant to grapple with.
Okay, so Martin, is that the approach you're taking at Nationwide?
I'm shaking my head violently because I think it's absolutely spot on. Because one of the things a lot of organisations don't do is we set out to say, well, the processes that we can eliminate first and foremost. Then the next step around simplifying the process, because often organisations will, I've got my as is and I'm going to go to my to be. By actually simplifying the process, I'm making it relevant for customers today. Then you automate it. The final step is about automating it. If you get that right, then you can square that circle away between giving the customer something that they want and creating a compliant process that actually is a win-win for the customer.
Okay, let's come back and talk in detail about that organisation in just a second.